morning to everyone who joined. And I'm very happy to have you all here in this early hour on a Friday. So thanks for being here. I'm just going to give a short introduction, and then I will hand it over to Alex and the other speakers to have the conversation. My name is Kata, and I'm from Aarhus University, and I am the coordinator of the project, the Digital Fashion Roundtables, and this is why we are here today. We had our first roundtable on Wednesday, where we discussed digital fashion already, more from a technical and legal point of view. And today we will look at it from another perspective. Yeah, we will have some fun with it. Again, I would like to ask you to ask your questions in the chat. You can just leave it there and I will monitor the chat as we go. And then I can ask either during the conversation or towards the end, where we have time for a little Q&A. And we are also recording the session, so we will share it afterwards. And that's all the practical information that you need to know. And I'm just going to hand it over to Alex now to start.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alex. I am a Web3 Commerce Manager and Product Manager at the Dematerialised, which is a digital fashion marketplace. And I'm going to be facilitating and partially also participating in the conversation today, which is about digital fashion. Not so much maybe from a technical angle as we had 2 days ago, or a legal angle, but just from a very introductory conversation, kind of trying to give everyone an understanding of what is going on with digital fashion. The scene has started evolving a couple years ago, I would almost say, but is still very nascent. And there are, I think, a lot of unanswered questions maybe in people's minds. We had a questionnaire going around prior to the talks, and this is what fed into kind of the topics that we want to cover today. So we're really trying to give you a better understanding based on the questions that you've posed to us prior to the talk. I have two amazing speakers with me that I would like to introduce and also ask to introduce themselves. Maybe starting with Beata Wilczek, who is founder of the consultancy and lab Unfolding Strategies, and also my colleague at the Dematerialised. Beata, would you like to shortly introduce the work that you do?
Thank you. Thank you so much, first of all, for inviting me here, Kata and Alex. I really appreciate it, and it's a pleasure to be discussing those things with you all. Unfolding Strategies is a consultancy and education lab, which is focusing on digital, diverse, and sustainable fashion and Web3. And it comes from my experience from both working with industry and with education as a researcher and lecturer. And it kind of zooms into this moment when both amazing things that are happening now in the world, but also the not so amazing ones come together, and we need to look at them in unison. So one being the digital transformation and another the climate crisis. So it's important for me to look at those things together. So that's why we launched Unfolding Strategies during the beginnings of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we focus on three things at Unfolding. We do education, so we facilitate a lot of workshops with brands, with institutions on those topics. We focus on consulting projects. So let's say there's certain big questions that need to answer, there's necessity for some research, we also step in. And we did that, for example, for, I don't know, also academic institutions. And I would say part that's most fun, it's the creative strategy part, where we work on, for example, concept for product development and so on. Lastly, we've been working with a very nice Berlin-based DJ and thinking how she can expand into the space of digital fashion and embrace her community and also support them there. So this is kind of a scope of what I do at Unfolding, and I joined the Dematerialised and the fashion NFT marketplace 6 months ago, and I'm responsible for developing the impact strategy, which is now mainly focusing on nurturing our community and making them more informed, because there's still a very new space. On growing responsibly and making our product the best way possible, and also sharing our vision and also making our partner be part of that vision, because it's quite exciting opportunity to be able to build and create fundamentals for what digital fashion can be, but also what it shouldn't be. So these are the things that I do.
Amazing. Thank you, Beata. And next, Pavwan, you're a multidisciplinary fashion and product designer. Would you like to give us a better understanding of what that means and what you do?
Hi, so I'm a fashion and product designer and I've recently graduated. And most of my interests and my work lie within understanding what digital identity could look like, how different it could be from your physical one, and how and why we choose to represent ourselves a certain way. So what could influence it? Could it be culture, society, politics, or just wanting to be able to represent yourself in the most accurate way? So I'm just looking at trying to understand from a user perspective and from a designer perspective what digital fashion could look like if you would want to express yourself in a certain way. And I'm just starting off, so yeah.
Awesome. Okay, heading into kind of the first topic or the first theme that I wanted to touch upon today is to give everyone kind of an understanding of where and how can we best enter the metaverse today. So without trying to define the metaverse too much, maybe looking more at tangible examples of how can you be a participant in the metaverse right now, if you would log on, basically. Beata, do you want to take a stab at that question?
Yeah, sure. I think it's interesting that you're proposing not to define the word metaverse because it's a very separate territory. But I think we can now experience certain platforms where we can get a glimpse of metaverse might be or is becoming. And definitely some of those platforms are Roblox and Decentraland. And it basically means going to a website, going to the link, and typing in some details, sometimes joining with different various, I don't know, things like MetaMask. It sometimes can get a bit more complicated. And then creating a mini-me version that later can go and explore an environment that's kind of common for people who are used to gaming, but maybe not necessarily common to people who are not gamers. And then you can do different things and traverse different spaces and lands. So this is definitely something interesting about what can you do there, how can you look, and how you interact with other people. I would say these are kind of important things, especially to those who think it's the same as gaming. It's not. I think the kind of social component is here very important, and it also leads to, and as there's the body involved, there's a space being created, and there are interactions and experiences to happen. I think there's also a lot of interest in goods and commodities that can be attached to it. So this would be my very introductory explanation of it. And I think it's the best way to do it is to just to hop on one of them and log in. And we all have experiences with very kind of Web2 platforms like Facebook, where we had to create our mini-me avatar representation already. So it's just kind of pushing that farther and experiencing it in different ways. And I would say that probably attending an event is the best way to kind of enter this space, or at least it was for me.
Thanks. That was really nice. Really well summarized. Pavwan, I would love to ask you, how do you think about digital identity in the metaverse, or what spaces have you entered maybe personally?
Personally, I've used Spatial and Decentraland. I have yet to look into Roblox. And Second Life, I think, is an interesting one. But I think that it's just a term that is sort of made people so confused and sounds very intimidating. But we do have experience with 3D virtual worlds that allow interaction in some way or the other. It is very different from gaming, but we're aware of what the possibilities could be. But it's interesting to see how much you can interact with a completely different community that you may not even know of within a metaverse sort of environment. And I do agree, attending an event is a great way of sort of seeing what's possible, and how I'm sitting in Dubai and I could be best friends with someone who's in the other part of the world, and sort of learn from their experiences and how, because everything is so new, they're also new to the same environment. And what's interesting is that we all experience the same thing. So in a physical setting, that could be different because, you know, we're all living different lives, but within the digital world, it's pretty similar. And the ways that you can express yourselves is also very similar. Because there aren't really that many limitations when it comes to the tools that you have and how you look like, the language that you choose to communicate in. So it's all very connected, but yet decentralized at the same time.
Yeah, I think a theme that both of you touched upon is already kind of digital identity and what we look like when we enter these metaverse platforms. And I think this is exactly where digital fashion, I think we would all agree, comes in and is relevant to how we present ourselves. Something that I would love to add on kind of to how entering, or for the question, when entering the metaverse, maybe what is interesting to pay attention to is that when we speak about metaverse platforms, sometimes we're speaking about on-chain, so blockchain-based games, which, for example, would be Decentraland, and sometimes we're speaking about games that have no connection to blockchain. So, for example, Roblox. Blockchain-based games are interesting because this is where NFTs come into the mix. So my next question would be around kind of what can a digital fashion NFT be today in terms of what does it look like visually, or what files are attached to it, or what kind of utility does it offer? And yeah, I think that's basically the question. Let's keep it simple. Beata, I'll pass to you.
I think I can start, but I think with our shared work together, I think he would be a great person to also follow up on it. And probably I think you have, even in terms especially of files and technical properties, I think it would be great that you answered that. I think that probably when most of people think about NFTs, they think about either certain profile pictures or art NFTs or certain virtual garments floating in the air. I think these are the kind of three standard categories. And it's important to think about NFTs, the non-fungible tokens, in a kind of broader context. So NFTs can be also, I don't know, let's think of them as tickets that they give you access to something. Let's think there can be something visual attached to them, but not necessarily. And with fashion comes into play, we also like to wear garments that we have, which is obviously not a necessity in the cyberspace, but we also would like to wear them. So this is the question of utility. What can I do with it? So can I wear it? Can I just own it? Or can I use it? Can I get some access? So I would say these are, to me, the fundamental ones. And I would say that in terms of fashion NFTs, we can see NFTs that can be worn and are wearable. And I think this is a quite significant distinction among other very visual NFTs, such as art NFTs, because you can actually put it on your body. And you can, for example, do it through virtual dressing. So you can just apply it on a photo. You can apply this garment. You can wear it also in a way that we use filters that allows also wearing a garment. And you can wear it, for example, in Decentraland, going to an event. You can wear it as your outfit being in one of those gaming platforms, what we consider examples of metaverse. So these are the kind of ways how we can engage with it and how it can be used, I would say, and these are the main ones. The one that's very interesting, and I think maybe we will touch upon this word later, is a phygital. So when actual physical garment there's an NFT, but also a physical garment existing. So there is this kind of duality of the product, we could say. But I think, Alex, I would give it to you to maybe to share more about precise kind of technical specs and also maybe more utilities.
Yeah, maybe something that could be interesting to make it very kind of tangible. What can an NFT be? It can be an MP4 video, it can be a JPEG, it can be a PNG file. And then there's various 3D file types. So we have GOB files and so on. So once you start getting into digital design, I think all of these file types open up to you. And then what is being attached to the NFT is really effortless and up to you, but it can also simply be an image of a digital garment. And maybe Pavwan, from a design perspective, but also from a user perspective, I recall you told me that you have several friends that own NFTs. Maybe you want to share some examples of what they own, but also what can a digital fashion NFT be for you?
Yeah, so I think with NFTs, most of it is right now is following a trend in a way, of wanting to own something that's exclusive, that nobody else has. So it really, it has this image of exclusivity that everybody wants to like sort of follow. But within digital fashion NFTs, what I think is interesting is that there's so many ways that it could be used. So one is a phygital with an NFT and a physical garment. Another really interesting one, which is what I'm looking into, is a phygital, not a phygital NFT with a physical and a digital garment, but something that's projected on your existing body, and how that could be a part of what you're already wearing. And a really interesting example of this would be from the Institute of Digital Fashion, where they, on the red carpet, I think Kelani wore one of their pieces, and it was specifically designed to become a part of an outfit that she was wearing, instead of it just being like a filter that sort of takes over the entire body and is really like not fitting as well. So that's a really interesting way of adding on and accessorizing. What I also really find interesting is prints as NFTs, because that can really transform anything really. And digital makeup, I think, can also kind of be a part of digital fashion. So those are some really interesting examples that I can think of.
Nice. I think we could have set a timer maybe for how quickly we touch upon the term phygital. And since we're already there, would you, Pavwan, like to take a stab at defining what phygital means, or explaining a bit more what you mean with the term phygital?
So in a very literal sense, it would mean something that's in part visual, physical, and in part virtual. But what's really interesting is how people perceive it so differently. For some, it could just be something that exists in a physical manifestation and a digital one, and it's an exact replica of what it is. But how I like to see it is how many different ways you can interact with it within the digital world and the physical one, and how different these interactions can be. So within my thesis, what I was doing was sort of exploring how you can bridge your physical and digital identities and how they can sort of exist together, and how accurate they can be. So what it was about was you're wearing something that belongs to you and is very physical and can be seen by everyone. But you can interact with it on a completely different level, where you scan different elements of it. And you have these digital artifacts that are very much coming from culture. And it was a more autoethnographic approach. So objects that were very close to me, it could be objects, it could be manipulation. So even a prosthetic arm, for example, becomes a part of my body. And it's not all, it's not an image, it's real time. And it's changing, and it can be manipulated, it can be viewed in different ways. So it's not something that's static, but it's something that's more fluid, and allows people to view it in different ways, and also allows me to keep changing and evolving, and that is how we are as people, I think. So something phygital is a great way of getting that across, I think.
Can you explain how you made the connection between the digital and the physical?
So the tool that I used was augmented reality, because initially it was about exploring different tools that we have, but with VR, it is one of the most used tools to explore the metaverse. But I didn't feel like it allowed that much interactivity. But with AR, you can see it on on you in real life in some sense. So I used augmented reality.
Yeah, very nice. Beata, what is your take on phygital or definition?
Yeah, so I think phygital can be many things. When I first was, I think, researching in 2019, I was interested in it as an adjective, like thinking that something is phygital, so it blends the physical and the digital, because it's a neologism that comes from more like marketing terminology, and it was apparently coined in 2013 by like a marketing agency in Australia. So it's kind of more like, if we think, for example, about commerce and selling products, this could be a phygital experience because I can buy something in store physically, but also online. And that's pretty good explanation of it. But then we started thinking also about phygitals as products, as goods. And this is an example that we gave before, that there can be that you buy an NFT, and also it has, for example, there's a unique piece. This is something that Dematerialised did, for example, with MCQ, that you could buy an NFT and then you receive this unique garment. So then it can be this product. And I remember when I was explaining it to for the first time during a talk, I was thinking how to show an example, and I had myself a Telfar bag. Telfar is a brand from New York, and I had this bag, and I scrolling through my phone, so a little Michaela wearing a Telfar bag. So I thought, okay, if little Michaela has this bag and I have it, and it would be the same bag that I just borrowed her, that would also be a phygital. So I think it's a very good kind of example of a product that just like kind of travels in between and has this kind of possibility, but it's still kind of trapped in this duality of IRL and URL. And I would propose to think even the phygital that's for fashion is like almost like a, you know, more academically speaking, like a condition, because this is what's happening with fashion now. This is not the fact that fashion is online and offline in a shop or on the website. I think it's somewhere in between. So this word that at first was just a marketing neologism now gets this amazing traction because it allows us to kind of give a name to where we are now, because we are in those both spaces. Even now, talking in education, we call it blended, but it's pretty much the same. We are in this, I would say, so to me, phygital is like a great term to call this kind of whole condition and movement of blurring more the digital and the physical world.
What you were just describing also makes me think of the terms IRL and URL, which are often also frequently used to refer to kind of this digital and physical reality or dimension. Do you want to explain those two terms and maybe your understanding of why they're being used, and if you have an opinion on them?
Yeah. So if we think IRL, we think about in real life, and this kind of, it has this element of realness. So when we use real, we are kind of assuming that URL is not real, but it is, because I'm now in my apartment in Berlin, and I'm also with you here online having this talk. So it's a very real situation. It's very tangible to me. It's warm, I'm sweating, we're here, we're having some, you know, I don't know, responses in our bodies. So it's not like these are two separate worlds, but this is something that we are very used to. So this kind of binary divide. And yeah, and I think that with fashion, the kind of little like semantic struggle we have is that we say very often that virtual is a synonym to like a not real, like an artificial. So then there's this feeling or thought that digital fashion is not real, but it's very much real. And it also has a tangible element because it has, you know, it consumes energy. Somebody has to produce it. There's labor coming into it. People can wear it. So most likely there are certain tangible properties to it. So yeah, that's why I think we should kind of slowly try at least, or think about it to transverse this IRL URL binary, even though it's very comfortable.
Yeah, agreed. Pavwan, would you like to speak more about why you chose digital tools and why you chose to move into that realm instead of just staying with pure physical fashion, put it that way?
That's a very interesting, if I look back and try to pinpoint, but I think it was very gradual, because we kept, you know, in the start of my 4 years, it was so new, and it did seem a lot like what Beata said. It anything virtual or digital, especially with fashion, didn't seem real. It just felt like it's an image or an illustration of something that can exist in the physical realm. So why not? But then as I started exploring, the possibilities that we have, you can wear something that isn't even made out of cloth or even a material that doesn't even exist, for example. That's one thing that's so interesting. You're defying gravity and physics in every sense. And it really makes your creative juices flow, I guess, in a way. But what was more interesting was how I could be someone completely different in the ways that I choose to express myself, or I could express myself in a way that I'm not able to in the physical space, because there's so many influences in the place we live, how we're looked at as a society. And with fashion, I think it really has the power of being able to express things that you may not be able to, especially within politics or an opinion that you may have. But with fashion, you can really get that across, indirectly or directly. It's completely open. And when I started exploring digital fashion and the tools, so Clo 3D, AR, VR, what I found really interesting was that it really has the ability to replicate something for a purpose that you may need it to be replicated. But the interesting part was being able to manipulate it. And that's what got me into the space. And then when I further looked into, why people are choosing digital fashion, why would they want to own it, digital digital fashion piece in the first place? It was really about looking at culture and how many ways it has influenced fashion in the past. And I try to point out, what went wrong, or what could have been better within the fashion industry for years. And then I did see a lot of those things being followed within digital fashion. And that's where in my thesis, I sort of tried to decolonize the space for designers, especially to see, we're following a certain standard that is not even set by us, that we do not relate to, but we're just blindly following it because it's a space that does not allow us to explore that much. So that's why I was exploring all these tools, and it brought me to where I am now.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that's something that a lot of people that are in the digital fashion space these days have in common. They have entered from a perspective of digital fashion as a tool or a means to change the fashion industry as it is now. And that's also something that I want to touch upon in the next topic. Before we go there, Beata, you had mentioned Lil Miquela, and I would love to give the room an understanding of who is Lil Miquela, and kind of who are maybe other figures that are like Lil Miquela, and what are their roles for the digital fashion industry. Do you want to speak on that, Beata?
Yeah, sure. So Lil Miquela is a virtual human. She mainly, I see her mainly living on Instagram, but I presume she traverses other digital platforms and spaces, and I never encountered her on any others. And she's a virtual human, and there's also, if anybody interested in that, a great website that writes about virtual humans. So probably if you just type in virtual human Google, you will see interviews with most of virtual humans that there are. Lil Miquela is created by a group of people. I don't remember now the name of the creators. Alex, do you remember who are the creators? How are they called?
No, I don't remember the name, but I know we're going to send out a newsletter after it.
Okay. But I think this is a space for that. So it's created by a team of people. So behind, I would say, every virtual human, there's a community, company, or at least one person shaping it or having this virtual human representation. And she is what we could call today also virtual influencer, a virtual model. So she can wear clothes, she can advertise them, she can show her lifestyle on social media. And virtual influencers are now becoming more and more popular. We also have different virtual models. So that's also the thing with digital fashion, that it doesn't have to be worn only on the human body or within particular gaming environment or metaverse, that also there's this kind of whole new plethora of models, influencers, that are digital, that are also kind of carrying and wearing it. So I would say this is the most interesting thing about Lil Miquela. She also reviewed and commented on a book by Legacy Russell, which is called Glitch Feminism. And there's also on the back of the book a kind of saying that this book is amazing. So Lil Miquela also has, I would say, a voice in academia and digital culture. So I wouldn't by saying that, it's a funny thing to know, but virtual humans are not only walking billboards. I think what is interesting is a form of kind of creating their agency and who they are and what they can become in the future. There are more and more popular one. I would say that Barbie is having a massive return also as a virtual influencer. So yeah, that would be my like little introductory take on that.
Nice, thank you. And maybe over to Pavwan, you mentioned earlier that you also think about the body a lot in virtual spaces. Do you want to comment your thoughts on?
I think within bodies and avatars in general in virtual spaces, it's one major point is representation, which I feel like the digital fashion space really lacks, because it is very Westernized. And I do believe that all bodies, races, genders, colors should be equally represented, because we say that, you know, there are no limitations within the digital fashion space because of the amazing tools that we have. But we're really not seeing that come across. In campaigns, they put one black model and they think they've done the role, but that's just a marketing gimmick to sort of say, okay, we're representing these people. But if you look at so many bodies, there isn't really enough representation. So I think that is one thing that really needs to be focused on, and we need to see a lot more of it.
Thank you, Pavwan. Coming to our last topic that I want to focus on, which is impact, social impact, environmental impact, decolonization. I know both of you are very engaged with all of these themes. So maybe first to you, Beata. I mean, a question or the kind of perspective that I want to take on this is, as a brand, how do I enter this space? How do I enter the space in general, and how do I do it in a responsible way?
Yeah, sure. I have a little list of tips, so I'm happy to share them. I think the first element is kind of almost touching upon what Pavwan said, and thinking about also plurality and like, who is the digital community? What are their experiences and what are you offering them? And also what communities are being affected and how. I think this is very, very important, because once we think it's for everybody or for Gen Z, this is not specific enough. And I think this is now very fundamental shift in understanding who is the digital community, and also who are we including and who are we excluding, because access is another thing. There are still billions of people who don't have access to digital technology, so this contributes to the digital divide. So also thinking, what is the access and who can partake? It's very important. Then the next one is values. We now see NFTs and digital fashion being kind of played with. It's still at its infancy. There's a lot of, I would say, sometimes great, sometimes not marketing exercises. And we need to start thinking a bit broader, like how NFTs can be implemented in a broader context and how they can be used in future, apart from this kind of momentum of hype, and how what's going to be a different applications. So I think also kind of what values are we communicating? What are the cultural and social values we promote? What do they stand for? I think this is also a very important part of like a narrative and messaging. Then obviously one of the main concerns when we think about NFTs and blockchain is the environmental impact. So it's very important to understand that not NFTs are equal and not all blockchains have the same energy consumption. There are different blockchains. Some of them run on consensus called proof of work, some on proof of stake. this makes a massive difference. So for whatever team and any company, this should be a crucial decision. There shouldn't be a fear. Do we do it because it's bad for environment? There should be more of a decision, how do we do it? Because if we say NFTs are bad, therefore we shouldn't make them, it's the same way as saying clothes are not sustainable either, so let's not make them. It's the same logic. And with fashion industry, we're used to the fact that now we're trying to change supply chains. We're kind of trying to embrace circularity and regenerative fashion. So with such new technological developments, we also need to think about it carefully and make smart decisions and choices. So I think if whoever is interested in it, I think going for making sure that it's a proof of stake blockchain that makes the energy consumption up to 90, I think some estimates say even up to 99% less. So it's a massive, massive difference, even if it's 97, according to some paper, 99%. And most of articles that we see are about Ethereum and Bitcoin, which are proof of work. So this is like a very big difference. And there are also great reports about it, some coming from Crypto Carbon Rating Institute, but those things are very new. Those reports are only coming out in the last 3 months. So there are scientists working on it. Cambridge University is very active on that. So there are also third-party companies. Dematerialised, we're working with one of them because this is very, very vital, but this is also very new. So this is the problematic. Yeah, and I think we need to think, if this is kind of technology and fashion meeting together, in general, fashion industry need to also think, if you're bringing AI to your company, what is the environmental footprint of that? If you're bringing automated production, what is the carbon footprint of that? So it's not only that we think about NFTs because we saw that they're very consumption heavy. I think that the role of sustainability officers is going to be super complicated once more digitization comes into play. And it's just going to have to merge somehow. And then the last part, and the one that I'm quite passionate about, is labor, because it's very easy to forget with all this excitement and all this newness that actually there's a labor behind those things. And for example, Alex, as a person working for a year in a Web3 e-commerce company, knows how massive amount of work it is. Pavwan, as a designer, also knows how many hours she spent in front of her computer, not only doing her research, but designing, executing, making things. So it's a tremendous amount of work. And as we have such movements as Fashion Revolution, and we say, who made my clothes? We also should bring this logic from the beginning to digital fashion. I think that's very, very important that we ask those questions. And we basically don't fall in the same footsteps as we had before, and we acknowledge digital labor, because digital labor, as with fashion labor, is renowned for being obscure. Like, who knows who invented, Google Docs? We don't know, Google, right? So we don't know that. And I think there is a need to kind of highlight that too. And I hope we will learn from recent developments in fashion from last, let's say, 10, 15 years, and we can learn and grow from it in digital fashion.
Yeah, really good point around the labor that goes into producing an NFT, I suppose, or producing a digital fashion piece. There's really a long pipeline that goes into it. And I think often brands expect the turnaround to be much quicker than with physical fashion, because there is this narrative around we're kind of avoiding sample rounds and so on and so forth, and kind of transport and all of that. But that does not mean that there is less time invested when it comes to designing and putting together everything. And Pavwan, you know this as well, like Beata mentioned, as a designer. And so I would also like to ask you, before we open up the round for questions, so if anybody has any questions, you can already start typing in the chat. I would like to ask you, what are the top 3, and it doesn't have to be 3 in the end, but what are the top 3 things that you would tell brands to think about before they start designing digital fashion, start entering the metaverse, start thinking about NFTs? What are kind of the 3 things they should be considering?
I agree with a lot of what Beata said. And I think one very important thing would be to sort of reinforce the values that we would want in the physical space in terms of sustainability. So sort of find ways of enforcing the same values in the digital space. An interesting example of this is by H&M. I think they had it's called Loop, and it's an online recycling stations that they have. And I don't know how impactful that can be, but it's an interesting way of sort of realizing that we need to follow the same values within the digital space, because the problems that we're facing are pretty similar when it comes to the carbon footprint, and the digital footprint can be just as huge as the physical one. So that's one. And another main one, I think, would be to allow co-creation within when it comes to producing a digital object, because right now a digital object really exists in a completely different space. So the retailer and the producer are in two different spaces. So allowing co-creation and sort of fitting into the digital divide that we have between the user and the designer, allowing full control over how people choose to represent themselves virtually, I think is a great step for brands to not keep replicating this idea of fast fashion. And digital fashion is not fast fashion, but it is following pretty similar ideals in a way. So allowing the users to interfere within the design process is pretty interesting. And I think brands can benefit a lot from it. So I think those would be my top two, and the rest, I think Beata has stated pretty well.
Thank you, Pavwan. I think that there was one question in the chat, Kata. You probably read through it, but from what I can see, it's something that Beata and Pavwan already touched upon. So I don't know if that question has already been answered, but otherwise it's focused around that question around why is it okay to start with NFTs if there's such a big sustainability question about it. Maybe Beata, you just want to, I know you spoke about this just now, but how can you justify kind of entering the NFT space?
How can I justify entering? It's like so when I went last week to the Global Fashion Summit, some sustainability policymakers or consultants told me that they are, for now, ignoring the space and they don't want to engage with it. And they asked me if this is bad, if it's ignorant, and I said, no, you're just delaying the process. Why you're delaying the process? Because blockchain as a technology has been around for a while and it's just maturing, and we're going to use more and more of it. So I don't think it's really a choice. I think for now we see it more as a kind of hype marketing exercise and testing what it could be, because this is also a necessary phase to go through. That's also why a lot of digital fashion still kind of looks quite similar, and there are now there being a kind of distinguished different styles being developed slowly, but we need to work it through and we need to go through it. So I don't think it's a question why, but I think it's a question when, because what dot-com bubble, and I don't know, even, banking going digital many years ago taught us that technology, if it gives us some benefits and it's useful and it makes a little bit of sense, it's just kind of follows. So I think it's up to us now to actively think how we embrace it, how we use it, and what we make out of it, rather to say yes or no to it. That is my also very personal feeling about it. And I think it's and I think it's just delaying the process. So I think the more stakeholders come to these conversations, and I mean academics, critical practitioners, I don't know, sustainability activists, I think everybody's very needed in that space. And I think there are conversations to be made. We cannot discredit it just because it's difficult or uncomfortable, or we read one article about it. That's why I personally entered the space, because I think it's almost a duty to think how it can be improved and how it can be done well, because we already know that technology can do amazing things when done well, but also can do horrible things on level of society. So I think it's important to look at it carefully from up close and not from a distance.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Kata, I would love to hand over to you to...
Actually, I see another question coming in, but I also have some questions. And before I ask Amir's question, I just want to comment and maybe ask a little bit more, because I really, really like how this conversation was shaped. I really enjoyed how you talked about the physical space and digital space and how they can interact. And I feel that you're talking about the digital space as a space that can make the physical space better. It's not just a copy paste of it, but kind of the extension of it. And that's how I think it should be as well. But I also understand that there are a lot of like fears or concerns and questions around this when you come from a brand perspective. And I also see some bad patterns appearing in the digital space already that already appeared in the physical space when it comes to fashion. And I don't know, it's just if you could consult with a brand or give them advice, what are these bad patterns that you would like to warn them about or tell them to avoid? And what advice would you give them when it comes to entering the digital space? I don't know who would like to answer this question. Either of you or all three of you.
Pavwan, would you like to start?
Yeah, I think I've mentioned it earlier as well. One main thing that is problematic with fashion existing today is that it's ignorant to so many cultures and so many people and so many communities. So that's one thing that can be avoided, and it's very possible to do that within the digital space. The other, I think, is also sort of answering Amir's question in the chat, is overproduction and prototyping. So that's something that can be heavily reduced within the digital space, because when you go into producing a physical sample, and it's just the first test of many tests before it actually starts selling, just the threads that you cut off, in a year can produce thousands of kilograms of waste, and that could be avoided. And it's saving so much time, because something that you would have to source and cut and stitch, including all the waste, for a rejected sample could be done within an hour in 10 different colors, 10 different prints. And that is saving so much money, time, and is not producing as much waste. So that is one thing that can also be reduced and have, because the fashion industry is known as one of the most harmful, pollutant industries. So with the digital tools that we have, it really is possible to cut down on so much of that.
Yeah, if I could follow up on that, what Pavwan said, virtual sampling, if there's definitely something about digital fashion and 3D design that supports circular strategies and making companies more sustainable, this is virtual sampling for sure. They're amazing. There's amazing academic research on that. Those things are put to practice. They exist. They've been done. I host a podcast called Fashion Knowledge, and this is what we talk about with Yvan Poo, who's a digital fashion designer. And she only discovered that for her own work with manufacturers and brands, and thinking that how actually can support a zero waste kind of system of making fashion. So to her, as a digital fashion designer, this is very vital and important part of her work. So there are people who kind of come to the space with this agenda, knowing that they can transform the space with 3D design this way. So I think it's it's great, and I think that's amazing. And when anybody says, can digital fashion in any way make it really more sustainable? Yeah, I think that's one of those spaces that this is like 100%. There's no doubt about it. But Kata, coming back to your questions, what is not to do, I think not to be scared. I think ask questions, do proper research, think why, think more on because this is in the end about new, also for brands, for new revenue streams, right? It's about making business and money and creating new products and new experiences for consumers, for kind of making, experiences and relationships with them. So there is a lot to be gained. So just thinking, how does it fit into, I think, the company, the business overall, not how it could be like this cool one thing because everybody's doing it. See a lot of it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I think on the thinking about it and integrating it to bigger scale. I know many brands are experimenting and seeing what it is for them, but I think we'll see more like kind of mature business development oriented thinking around that. I don't know, Alex, what are your thoughts? Because you work with so many companies, so you definitely have some hot tips on that.
Yeah, I wanted to also add on what you were just saying, kind of from the business perspective, how entering the metaverse, kind of what to pay attention to or what to be careful about. I would say treating it like any other project that you're starting or any other market that you're entering. So same as deciding to launch a social media account or to enter a new market, as in a new country or anything. Really having a strategy for it and having a plan for it and asking the questions in advance. And like what Beata said, thinking about how is this really genuine to our company? So what can we be in the metaverse? And maybe that is not a collection of digital fashion garments sold as NFTs. Maybe that is, so an example that I can, or that I like to use from a project that we've did with the Dematerialized is Karl Lagerfeld, who has been selling, so the Karl Lagerfeld brand, who has been selling little figurines. So with them, we actually haven't developed a digital fashion collection that you can wear in AR or bring into different platforms in that way, but it's collectibles. So maybe that is something that is more in line with how your brand can launch in the metaverse than going into garments and try on there. And maybe it starts with, an Instagram filter or a Snapchat filter that is a marketing tool. Maybe it starts with an NFT collection that is focused around building a community or an entry price point to your brand. Or maybe it's about bigger projects such as developing your own platform or game where you can invite your users in or rethink the way you do it. So there's lots and lots of different entry points, and I would say that maybe NFTs aren't the first option when we think about how you can enter the metaverse. So I would differentiate kind of, there's metaverse and then there's blockchain, which they overlap, but they're not necessarily at this point in time super, how do you say, connected. So there's many entry paths that can be considered.
Yeah, that's well put.
And also I have another question. It's more from the user perspective or the consumer perspective, because you started your conversation saying that these digital spaces, they are not entirely familiar for people who are gaming, but there are a lot of people who are maybe not scared of this space, but not familiar with this space. And my question is, how can a brand make it easier for those to enter the digital space? Because maybe they want to lure in people who are not necessarily comfortable in this digital space. So what are the possibilities there to engage and interact with people who are new to the digital space? Sis.
Really good question. Do you want to go first?
I thought Pavwan might want to take this one from a user perspective. Pavwan, do you want to give it a go?
I think because I can relate to this so much, because initially I didn't know how to use any digital garment that was available on any platform. I had no clue. Like, how do they do this? Does this work like Snapchat? Or but I think an interesting way that brands could do this is very simple, and it's just about showing people how it's done. So it's as easy as a very short tutorial of, where it's possible, how can I wear it, and how can I use it later on, and not just play around with it, not just have fun with it, but how is it useful? So just make it very clear and transparent, starting from the design process to the tech process of how do I put it on, the measurements, are there any restrictions in terms of the way I need to pose, sizing, material, anything, and then how I can use it within my social media, because right now that's like one of the main reasons why people are going into it first, and then they can explore different ways. So just targeting those areas, and making it very easy for people to access.
Yeah, and I think it's important to think there will be users that are digital native and they will be very versed with that. But then there's the brands community that's entering the space with you. So I think there's also in brands, there's a duty to deliver it clearly, how, where, when, what for. I think if it's explicitly said, this is like a kind of recipe for success. And otherwise, there's no point in making the project if the user perspective is not involved.
Yeah. Just to summarize, I would say it's educating the user along with yourself. That's the process, or the ideal process. So very important, because there's going to be a broad variety of people that might engage in the digital space with your brand and have different backgrounds and not levels of knowledge on how to use various tools.
Thank you. Very great answers. And I think it's going to be very useful for the brands as well to listen to this. And I have one closing question because we have 2 more minutes. And I just got back from a metaverse trip from Seoul. And it was very interesting to meet different people who were working with this digital space that is called the metaverse. But a lot of people, when we were talking to them, they kind of avoided defining the space. And of course, I understand that it's kind of an undefinable space at the moment, or it's being shaped at the moment. But if you think about it in the future, in the future, like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, how would it look? Or how would you define it in your own way? How would you like it to look? That's more my question. If you can think about it in the future, because it is being shaped right now, and I hope it will be shaped in a good way. But how would it be shaped in your way, if you had to say? That's my closing question, maybe to all 3 of you.
I would just say that I personally have 2 takes on this. One is personal utopian, so kind of following the Web3 manifesto and thinking of metaverse as a decentralized space where the creators have the power, and the power relationship as we know it now is flipped. But this is a little bit of a utopian scenario. Other one, that there are many commercial different, let's call them platforms, that are interoperable, and we can basically flow from one another, but still hopefully the power dynamic, so who owns what and who creates what and how benefits from it, because now it's us doing secret labor for many different platforms in Web2. For example, me posting on Instagram since 2012. That's, I've been working for Instagram for quite a long time. So I think in that sense, this is for me the crucial element that will change and shift. And how are we gonna move from one metaverse to another if it's a different commercial platforms? The time will show, but definitely a dream is this interoperability and being able to jump from one to another, and that's very possible. And I think the one thing that many people are talking also about is kind of going beyond the screen, that the screen won't be the limitation. And there are many conversations about it. This is also something that Kostas Kazantis, in the podcast we did together, he's a creative technologist and educator at UAL. He talks that soon a screen will be obsolete. So this is a part that I'm very curious about, how to make it a place where this power dynamic between the kind of the company and the user is flipped, how it is decentralized, how it's accessible for many, but also how it goes beyond the screen. So that would be my answer to that.
Pavwan, do you want to go next?
Yeah. For me, I think what I would like to see in the coming, I would hope as soon as possible, is being able to allow everyone to be able to be a part of it, regardless of where they come from, what tools they have. Because right now, like Beata said, it does have this restriction in a way of a screen. And if we think about it now, everyone in a very different part of society has access to it. But there's so many people who still don't. And so I would like to see how it can be accessible to literally everyone and not just everyone in the community. because that's how it is right now. And sort of having the same experience for everyone would be really interesting to see. So I think for me, I think that would be a good starting point. And then with the metaverse, I don't know how far you can go, because right now we're, a lot of my questions are, but you still need physical clothes. Maybe not, maybe in the next 50 years you don't, who knows? Like it's crazy the amount of how far you can go with it. So I'm really like looking forward to seeing where that goes.
And maybe just as a last addition, I would love to see the digital space and how it evolves. So how our clothes will become more and more enhanced in augmented reality, and how maybe we're not spending full time in the metaverse in VR or in front of screens, but maybe being able to put on a white tee in the morning and decide, okay, today I want my t-shirt to say the slogan, or I want it to show this picture, or I want to express myself in this way. And other people might be able to scan my shirt and see what I'm wearing on a digital level versus what I'm wearing on a physical level when they don't use augmented reality. So I'm very curious about how that's going to be in 5 years, because a lot can happen.
For sure.
Great answers.
And sorry to cut you. I really hope that happens, Alex, because that's exactly what my thesis is about. So I'm hoping that I see this happen, because it would be amazing to see how much you can share with the community without it being on your physical self. I could be a snake or just a blob of anything in the digital world, and being able to share that in real time, and not me having to log into this software and then log into 10 different places to see. But if this is impossible in real time on the garments that you're wearing, that would be amazing. I hope that works out.
Great. So we are at the end of the session. So I'm gonna close it very shortly. And I would like to thank Alex, Pavwan, and Beata for being here. It was an amazing conversation. I hope we answered a lot of questions today. I also feel like we dropped a lot of names and platforms and podcasts and virtual avatars. So I will try to collect all these links from you so I can send it out to the participants. And I will also share the recording with all of you. And I'm also very happy to connect you maybe to the speakers if you have further questions, because I think we answered some of them, but I'm sure that there are more questions to be answered. But this was a great start, I think. And thanks again for being here.
Thank you very much. And thanks for everybody who was here.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. It was interesting to see different perspectives on the same thing.
Thanks for being here. It was great.
Have a nice day, everyone.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.